It was a day that began like any other. Everyone was gathered in attendance, but as time passed, the festivities of the convention were now in full swing. Glamours were shown off, emotes on full display, art lined the halls, and fans were getting the chance to spend time with their favorite creators. Indeed, this must have been a special event, a time of excitement and revelry. It must have been Lunarcon 2022. Hello everyone, I am the Synodic Scribe, and welcome to my lore panel for this year's Lunarcon. Let's get some tunes back in here, shall we? There we go, that's much better. Excellent, excellent. I am so happy to be able to be here for all of you today. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and to think that my first ever live lecture would be in front of so many people, so many fans, and at Lunarcon, nonetheless. If you told me a year ago that, mind you, a year ago I only had like 100, 200 subscribers. If I was told, hey, you're going to be performing at next year's Lunarcon, and there's going to be a huge line outside, a bunch of people just gathered around here to listen about lore and all sorts of nonsense, I would have said, maybe. That's an interesting fantasy, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Stranger things have happened. But good lord, I'm looking at the numbers here. 800, 850, 872. The number just keeps going up. There are so many of you here, and this feels amazing. So glad to be here. So glad to be able to experience this with all of you. It truly is an experience of a lifetime, and I am so glad to be able to experience it with all. Oh my god, the number's about to break 900. Oh, this is great. This is going to be a fun convention. So, before I get started, I would like to shout out to Shenpai, her friends, like everyone over on the Lunarcon Discord, everyone, all the mods, the organizers. These people have worked really, really hard to make sure that this digital convention goes off without a hitch. So, a quick round of applause for our generous hosts, if you don't mind. So awesome of them to put... Yeah, there you go. Clappity clap clap. So, no, it's amazing of them to put all this together for us. And even more so, to even allow someone like me to get behind a podium. That is a dangerous thing to do, as some of you might know. Oh my goodness, 930. Oh man, that's great. That's the power I wield. Yes, the power I wield indeed. So, let us get down to business then, shall we? So, all that's out of the way. For those of you that are relatively new to me as an individual, or are just tuning in first time because it's Lunarcon and you want to see all the different panels, allow me to explain a little bit about myself. I am the Synodic Scribe. I am a Final Fantasy XIV lore enthusiast. I have made more than 100 videos dedicated purely to finding, detailing, and explaining various aspects of the lore in Final Fantasy XIV. And it has been a wild ride the past year, trying to cover as much as I can. And even after a year of dedicated research, writing, and all that nonsense, I'm still not done. I'm still nowhere near done. There's still so much to go over, because despite Final Fantasy XIV not having a massive lore presence, there's tons to go over. And I'm so excited to be able to share what I find with as many people as possible. And hopefully so many more in the future. there's no idea that what we may or may not be able to learn moving on. But that's me, lore guy, the official masky boy of the Final Fantasy XIV lore community. And other than that, I don't know. I feel like we can maybe get into the meat and potatoes of everything. I think that's about everything I wanted to go over real fast. Excellent. So, before I get my hands dirty with all the lore and nonsense we're about to discuss soon, allow me to explain. This is going to be heavy. There is going to be spoilers. There's going to be explanations of retcons. There's going to be possibly some headcanons that are blown up. So fair warning, if you do not like spoilers, if you do not like anything that you haven't researched yourself or found interesting on your own, I want to give you the opportunity to walk away, because this is going to get crazy. Because I know Final Fantasy XIV is that weird game where even almost a decade after ARR's release, think about that for a second. Next year will be A Realm Reborn's anniversary. 10-year anniversary. That's crazy. So, even after being around for 10 years, there's still tons of people that are like, no, don't spoil this for them. Or try with all your might not to spoil certain aspects of the story. And, of course, we all understand. Like, you have those moments in ARR, you have those moments in Heaven's Word, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and finally Endwalker. It gets crazy for sure. So, spoiler heavy. But, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's address what this panel is all about. Welcome to Reading Between the Ley Lines with me, your host, the Synodic Scribe. What is Reading Between the Ley Lines to me? When I try to make lore videos, when I try to create lore content, I want to follow the information as written as closely as possible. Because let's be honest with ourselves, Final Fantasy XIV has a lot of passionate players in it. We have so many people that have written up amazing stories for their Warriors of Light, so many great RP ideas, and honestly, sometimes I've read certain bits of headcanon that I think are even better than some of the side content sometimes. But when making lore content, I feel it's important to stay as true to the material as possible. Otherwise, you know how it is. Weird facts start flying left and right, people don't know what's real anymore. But if you stick to the source material as clearly as possible, it still turns out that there's tons to learn about, explore, learn, and not to mention all the like philosophical nuggets that are like put in little bits of cutscenes and side quests that some people kind of just skip through. I assume some of you know cutscene skipper or two. Maybe they're a friend of yours. I certainly know some of them, and it hurts, doesn't it? But if that's their prerogative, that's how they want to play, no problem with that. So we're going to be going all in on the story here right now. And we're going to begin with what is possible in Final Fantasy XIV that you may never experience because of the limitations of being a video game. It is possible in this world to do certain things, perform certain actions, abilities, and whatever, that you may never have the chance to do on your own. And that's not because the developers don't want you to do those things. It's because of software limitations, hardware limitations, the time and money that would go into making these things would steadily increase in volume to a boiling point. And understandably, they want to try to get to the heart of what they feel is the core experience of the game as quickly as possible. Save time, save money, and that allows them to work on other things. A lot of people wonder, like, how is Final Fantasy XIV able to roll out patch after patch, expansion after expansion without any hiccups when compared to other MMOs or video games where constant delays or patches with very minimal material and so on and so forth. And that's because Final Fantasy XIV's development staff are clearly focused on getting to what they think the core of everything is all about. But, as you all know, I've tried to address some of these things. I've tried to address that in certain aspects of the race videos, like the remade Mikote video I did not too long ago, how you have so many different Seeker of the Sun tribes, and we only see, like, 2 of them in their quote-unquote natural habitat. But there's so many others. The Keeper of the Moon, we don't actually see, like, an active Keeper of the Moon tribe in the Black Shroud. They are that secretive. They are that out of the way. They don't want to be observed. And the Primals themselves, their history goes back long before the worship of the Beast Tribes. There are stories of how they lived as servants and vassals of the very gods and encouraged the creation of the world, the stimulation of everything. Leviathan, like the picture I have up right now, was all dedicated to filling the oceans with water, making sure that the lands would never dry up. And even after his labor, he fell to the bottom of the sea, never to awaken again. My most popular interpretation of the lore, or presentation of the lore, Dark Knight. That video did phenomenally. It was actually surprising how well it did. But there's only so much you can experience as a Dark Knight. Of course, you're flying around the map with a great sword in your hand, smiting down all sorts of ne'er-do-wells and evil men and women that deserve it, frankly. There are some NPCs in this game that deserve it. But there's an entire aspect of the Dark Knight that many people aren't going to see. A Dark Knight's dark arts is much more thoroughly explained in some of the side content. Dark Knights have a dedicated spell school. They have so many different ways to manipulate their ignited aether, to cast spells, to throw people up and down, and soak the land in darkness. But then you have expansion like Endwalker, where the coolest move a Dark Knight is able to think up is Flood of Shadow, but fancier. So, understandably, the Dark Knight's potential never will be fully realized, but it's interesting to know that it's there. Ninjas, all over the place. They're able to move in and out of all sorts of areas undetected. The Lupin. Honestly, everyone's favorite wolf boys. I think it's hilarious that you still got some people that are over the moon to try and get these as a playable race. And understandably, they're fun. And covering their lore was a great way of announcing to everyone and exploring the idea that just because a character might not ever be playable doesn't mean it doesn't have a rich story behind it. And speaking of story, I would be remiss if I did not talk about the infamous 1.0 lore. So much was changed in 1.0 to 2.0. But, thankfully, we were able to keep aspects of it, like Nail, Deus, Darnus. But if you're one of the people that watched my lore videos on Nail, you would understand that Eula Darnus is the dangerous one here, not Nail. And of course, backstories about the Scions. There are entire side content and publications that go about characters like Y'shtola and her childhood, growing up, studying under Matoya, who was actually kind of mean. I'm not going to say she was a cruel teacher, but she certainly wasn't nice. But she still grew up. And she became the mage that we all know today. But now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's get on to some of the fun parts about what we can and can't do. I love this picture because this little Lalafell, this little potato, has been fumbling with his training to become a pugilist for almost 10 years now. But the poor little guy still hasn't gotten a hang of it. I have faith that one day he will. But pugilist is a good reference point for what you would see normally, but isn't necessarily as important. Is the lore there? Yes, but the classes kind of take a back seat when compared to the lore of the jobs. And speaking of jobs, when you take them in to fight characters like Shiva, for instance, has anyone ever wondered how she's able to fly around? How she's able to basically, besides being a primal, essentially defy physics? Well, she's not. She's following the rules of Aether. There is Aether in everything. In the ground, the air, the water. It permeates everything in existence. All a character like Shiva is doing when she flies is just riding the Aether that's already there. Imagine an object's buoyancy for a moment. If the Aether is more dense than the energy around it, then it's possible for it to float, to rise above the other energy around it. So that's what's happening. Shiva's able to fly because she's coasting on the Aether that is around her. And the same goes for all of your mounts after you finish attuning to all the Aether currents. As ridiculous as a flying T-Rex sounds, it can happen in the right circumstances. Sorry about that. Need to get a drink of water. But honestly, if you think flying through the air, or the idea of your Warrior of Light flying through the air is, like, weird or a ridiculous sentiment, I want to remind you that you're able to teleport across the entire world in just a few seconds. Based on your load time. But you know what I mean. Being able to teleport from place to place is phenomenal. You're essentially decorporealizing you're throwing yourself into the ethereal realm temporarily by use of aetherite, and then appearing on the other side. And yet there are some people that think, oh, the Warrior of Light can't fly. They absolutely can. Given the right stimulation, the right control of Aether, they absolutely can. And of course, this goes back to what the jobs are capable of. The jobs are capable of more than you'll ever get to see. or ever might see. Simply because there's only so many abilities they can add at any given time. There's only so much button bloat they can get away with until people are going nuts. As of this moment, I think you all understand, if we have any Astrologian mains out there, we understand that there is a button bloat issue there. Don't y'all? There is. But it will prove that these things, while fantastic, are a bit limiting. Can the Warrior of Light fly? Yes. Will they? Probably not. Can Dark Knights manipulate crazy amounts of Aether and soak an area in darkness? Probably, but might never see it. But we can take this one step further. We can extend this idea to locations. Did anyone else notice that this little section on Southern Othard was revealed in Endwalker? You've got Dalmasca right below the burn, but you also have another location exposed on the very southern tip. That is the port city of Volnane. Volnane is a location that, of course, was under Imperial control, and things happened to that place if you go through the Bojin records. I'll likely make a video dedicated to all that, but even though we can see these locations on the map, we've only been near them or within them through raids or side content, and only ever temporarily. Which is, understandably, I don't know if I would say disappointing is the right word, but it is the closest to what I would draw to, simply because Volnane is located right on the edge of the Golmore jungle, right? And what is the Golmore jungle associated with as far as Final Fantasy lore is concerned? In Final Fantasy XII, the Golmore jungle was associated with the Viera heavily. So, you're going to open up the map, show me Volnane, show me the Golmore jungle, and then tell me I can't go there to collect lore on the Viera. Come on. Come on. But, like I said, sometimes you just gotta go with the flow. Sometimes other areas aren't as important as some, and of course, heck, we may never even get to go to Volnane. We may never ever see the Golmore jungle simply because that might not ever be the direction the riders decide to head into. I know there's a lot of people that are expressing tons of interest in heading over to Miracidia, which is understandable, because that's an entire continent that is detached from us. All sorts of primal and dragon nonsense going on down there. But that does move us on to what I would like to call don't show more than you plan on exposing, at least in the lore. Final Fantasy XIV, as far as I've learned from lore research, is it has a bit of a problem. They love to tell. They don't like to show. And some of you may understand by the little picture I have here in the corner is a reference to what originally may have been the Musketeers in ARR. Of course, now it's just a gun registration depot for people going in and out of Limsa Lominsa. But I would like to use this as a moment to explain Chekhov's gun. What is Chekhov's gun? In literary terms, it is an idea that you do not show something unless you plan on either using it or elaborating on it. For instance, this concept was originally designed for play stages. And the play state, and the playwright state, that if you put a gun on stage, At some point during the play, it must fire. Otherwise, why did you put that gun on the stage? You can't say that you put it there for decorative purposes. You showed something that was very interesting, and you're not going to utilize it. Why? That is something that Final Fantasy XIV has struggled with for a while, but understandably, we can probably lay that at the feet of the transition from 1.0 to 2.0. That was not a seamless transition. But moving on in the future, I think Final Fantasy XIV could vastly improve its lore interpretations just by following that idea. The idea that if you're going to show something, go all out. Don't be afraid. Get a little crazy. Why not? And honestly, there are some locations that I just find interesting personally. Did you know that this next picture is actually from one of the PvP maps? And in the distance on this PvP map, you can see a temple. A massive temple. Off in the distance. And all I could think of to myself was, while I was playing PvP, was, man, I would love to go over there and see what all that's about. Why'd they build it? What's it doing there? And this is a good example of Chekhov's gun, my friends. You put something on the horizon that I find interesting, and likely I'm never going to go there. So what purpose is it serving exactly? As a decorative piece? Okay, fair enough. But I also understand that this idea of shock and awe has started to leak into gameplay a bit. I understand that there are many samurais out there that are a little upset about losing things like Kaiten recently. I get that. It's unfortunate. I feel like, personally, the lore has always been a bit of a side project sometimes, but it feels like some abilities are also becoming side content now, and I don't know. It feels a little excessive, personally. But that loops back to my point. Why show something cool if you're not gonna keep it? If you're not gonna dive deep into it and expose it, show more, reveal more. Astralosians and Dragoons have a big rework on the horizon, and I am terrified for them. As a lore person, I am so scared for them right now, simply because I remember when Astralosian first released. Does anyone else remember when Astralosian's 6 cards each had a unique effect? You had Bowl for the defense, Balance for the damage, you had Skill Speed up. And back when TP was a thing, remember TP? Good lord. Oh, TP, that was a time, wasn't it? But no, honestly, it was sad for me as a lore man to see all the Astralosian's cards get mundanely assorted into just damage up because people kept fishing for balance cards. From a design point of view, I totally get it. As a lore guy, it's a bit unfortunate. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed for all you Astralosian mains out there, that you're going to have a stellar rework. Something that not only fits the lore, but doesn't detract too much from your core gameplay right now. Hopefully it'll be great. But going from jobs, I would like to admit that, unfortunately, Sharlayan has bestowed its incompetence to the world at the moment, my friends. I think everyone has seen this image in Sharlayan. I think many of you have seen that they have this map of the 3 great continents. What's wrong here? Yes, that's right. Ilsa is still cloudy. Why in the world is Ilsa clouded on a map owned by the most learned individuals in the entire world. That makes absolutely no sense to me. When I saw this map, when I arrived in Charlene at the start of Endwalker, I kind of threw my hands up in the air saying, "You've got to be kidding me. The smartest people in the 3 great continents, and you don't have a complete map." Honestly, I'm not asking for a complete world map. You know, I'm not asking for them to detail all of Mirrorcitia. I'm not asking them to detail all of the New World. All I'm asking for is them to uncloud a map that has been around for almost 10 years. Come on. And honestly, this is the point where people need to come together. Come together, everyone. Say it with me. Uncloud Ilsa. Uncloud Ilsa. Uncloud Ilsa. This is the time where people who are fans of lore need to come up, rise together, and say, "Come on! It's been almost 10 years! If you don't have a set map for Ilsa at this point, why not? Just show it! It's Charlian, for goodness sake! They should know what they're talking about! They should be showing a map that knows what it's talking about. But yes, uncloud Ilsa. Uncloud Ilsa. And again, like I said, I'm not asking for a map that exposes the entire world. I'm asking for you to uncloud a section of the map that's been obscure for 10 years. That's nuts to me. And honestly, one of my friends, another lore personality, Croatoan, he revealed to me, or reminded me the other day, we're able to see the entire world from the moon. We can see the entire world. If someone was interested, they could map out the entire world right now. And yet Ilsa is still clouded. Why? That baffles me. So if ever you have the opportunity to go nuts and tell someone what you would want to see in the future, tell them to uncloud Ilsa, because this is unbelievable. How much lore are we missing out on? We've even traveled through the Ilsabardian continent at this point. Unreal. So, moving on. But I understand. From a design point of view, sometimes you won't be able to get away with revealing everything, because sometimes things aren't going to be as close or one-to-one as you hope they are. I want you all to take the Isle of Vilbrin, for example, as shown on screen. Everyone knows the Morabi dry docks, and you got little Limsa Lamins in the background, and you got the volcano off in the distance. Lovely. I actually love Vilbrin. Casa del Sol is one of my favorite places to hang out with my friends. But has anyone ever looked at Limsa from the Wolves' Den Pier? Look at that. There's a whole lot more island there all of a sudden, isn't there? Of course, you got Limsa Lominsa on the left side of the screen, but all the rest of that is Vilbrand. Now, in the previous picture, the Morabi dry docks were a lot closer, weren't they? They were much closer. And yet, from the Wolves' Den Pier, you don't even see them. That's so much. And yes, I understand that the picture is a bit cloudy. You should see me trying to collect footage when it's not raining. Honestly, everyone, my friends, it feels like whenever I try to collect footage for you all for my YouTube videos, that it is raining, it's cloudy, oh, now there's a thunderstorm. Oh, or heck, it's perpetually nighttime for some reason. It's unbelievable. But, and of course, some people might look at me and say, well, silly scribe, that's just the main continent of Aldenard in the distance, past Limsa. You don't see Aldenard from Casa del Sol, which is on the east side of Ilbrand. So no, it's not. That entire stretch of island you see from the Wolves' Den, all of it's Vilbrand. So, the Morabe Dry Docks, if you're ever there, very visibly close to Limsa, but in actuality, much further away than it looks. Much further away. And honestly, that's not the only guilty party here. Who else has noticed that during the Steps of Faith fight back in right before Heaven's Word, that you have to fight Vishap, easily one of the biggest dragons like ever, and you have to fight him on the bridge leading to Ishgard. My friends, this is not the same bridge. Have you noticed that? This bridge looks nothing like the one you fight Vishap on. The size is all wrong, the borders are missing, there's actually huge stretches of rock in the way, and all sorts of inconsistencies. But you know what? That's fine. That goes back to what I was saying earlier. Not everything is one-to-one. Not everything is able to be one-to-one because of software limitations, hardware limitations, so on and so forth. So as lore lovers, it's important for us to understand that inconsistencies like this, they're going to happen. They're going to exist no matter what. And an inconsistency doesn't break the world. Oh, sure, it might look weird and it might be a bit annoying to observe sometimes. I know some people that are still upset by the Steps of Faith looking like this. But that happens. But moving on, I would like to explain there are certain cutscenes that people either misinterpret or they read into them far too literally. So, like I said a moment ago, you can't read too literally into these things because, like we just shown, the Steps of Faith isn't the same. Vilbrand isn't the same. And this cutscene caused no end of confusion for a lot of people, because a lot of people took something different from this cutscene. So I asked myself, why? Why were so many people confused by what astral and umbral were, by light and darkness? How did this cutscene confuse everyone so much? Because I realized that astral and umbral are still the same. This cutscene didn't actually change anything. The lore is still consistent with what it was. So what was the problem? Astral still means positive or active energy. Umbral still means static energy. The confusion here lays at the feet of light and darkness. And I want to show you something. What Urianger says, his keywords, changes based off of the language you get them in. In English, he refers to them as astral and umbral. In Japanese, he refers to them as star and soul. And in the German, he straight up says light and shadow. And that was the moment I realized this is it. This is why so many people are so confused by this scene. It's crazy, isn't it? Honestly, the translation team, the writing team have such a big, monumental task in front of them. I do not envy them. I do not envy Koji Fox in any way, shape, or form. I respect the man immensely. But it's things like this that end up causing so much confusion for everyone. Understandably, too. So, my friends, if we read between the ley lines, what is the common theme between every language? If you completely forget about astral and umbral, star and soul, light and shadow, what is the common theme? The common theme is revelation. The idea that this cutscene is trying to instill in you is that light and darkness are capable of so much more than originally expected. That light and darkness... Darkness is capable of just as much good as it is evil. And light, in excess, is capable of evil just like darkness. That is all the cutscene was trying to tell everyone. It wasn't trying to change the elemental wheel. It wasn't trying to rearrange astral and umbral. It was just trying to open your mind to the possibility that light and darkness, or rather, the nature of Aether itself, is so much grander than anyone understands. And I think that's great, because the less we know, the more we have to research and find out on our own, don't we? But, as much as that wasn't a retcon, I feel like I need to address what is a retcon. Whoever's played 1.0 knows what this map is. And, oh, good lord. It's awful, isn't it? This is the Black Shroud in 1.0. It was a maze, a tapestry of just narrow paths and swamps and fallen trees and, oh, good lord. It was like, I felt like Pac-Man running through there. It was awful. Thankfully, that was changed, thanks to the Calamity. That was retconned. However, there is but I want to give everyone an example of a modern retcon, something that happened in Endwalker. Does everyone remember this cutscene with Xenos? This cutscene, Xenos was essentially explaining the differences, or not so differences, between you and him. There is lore here that was retconned, and it is the relationship between the Echo and the Blessing of Light. In his speech, Xenos admits that the Echo, it is what is giving you immunity to tempering influence. He tells you that the Echo is what is giving you the power to resist Primal's tempering, but what else could you do with the Echo if you weren't so limited? So, he proves that he can do this by using his I call it the photocopied Echo, the resonance, to essentially not only resist tempering, but assert his dominance over the Primal. So, the thing about this, right, is that in Endwalker, they say it's the Blessing of Light, all of a sudden. That it's the Blessing of Light which is resisting tempering. This flies in the face of Stormblood lore, Heavensward lore, ARR lore. It, unfortunately, is a massive retcon. And it's hard to explain aways things like that sometimes. But it was a weird retcon, yes. Does it break the lore? No. Because there are some ways that it could be easily explained away. But did they do those things? Not necessarily. Because I want you to imagine, look at that face. Is that the face of someone who has the Blessing of Light? Does this look like the face of someone who's been granted Heidelin's gifts and was able to get away with one of the most OP powers in the world? Yeah. Look upon me, my hated friend, my closest ally. Look upon my Blessing of Light as I assert dominance over Shinryu. No, he is using the Resonance, which is a copy of the Echo. And honestly, the change to the lore with tempering immunity makes cutscenes like the one with Fordola and Sri Lakshmi completely a massive error, because she definitely doesn't have the Blessing of Light. She honestly, her resonance isn't even in full swing. So, yeah, that was a retcon in Endwalker, but a retcon that is easily fixed. Did they? No. I hope they address it in the future. But for those of you that didn't know what a retcon looks like, now you know. And moving on, I would like to address, basically, something interesting. Everyone remembers Alexander. The Alexander raid. That was a great raid series, wasn't it? But moving on from retcons, we get into cool things like time travel. Endwalker, while an amazing expansion, was the source of a few points of interest as far as the storytelling is concerned. For example, our trip back to Elpis and Endwalker had to have been the first time the Warrior of Light ever traveled to that time. This shouldn't have happened. This couldn't have happened before. Because if you remember, in Shadowbringers, it is admitted that the 8th Umbral Calamity would have killed the Warrior of Light. And if the 8th Umbral Calamity kills the Warrior of Light, they never traveled back to Elpis. They never met Vina, or Hades, or everyone's favorite Hythlodaeus. That never could have happened. So whenever you're going through ARR, going through Heavensward or Stormblood, Hydaelyn is operating without the knowledge that the Warrior of Light brings back to them. It's crazy when you think about it like that. Now, does that mean that the data is, like, super important to the overarching lore? Not really. This data is ultimately inconsequential, but it's important to recognize and distinguish these things. That's the difference between good lore research and following crazy headcanon. And speaking of headcanon, let's talk about dynamis for a second. They introduced an entirely new energy separate to Aether and Endwalker. Dynamis. Oh boy, dynamis. Did you know that dynamis killed an entire lore video I had made for Limit Breaks? Yes, I had an entire video prepared for Limit Breaks a long time ago. And I knew I could not release that video. I couldn't release it. Because while the lore on that Limit Break video is still correct, it's explaining all of the different Limit Breaks, what they're able to do, I knew I could not release that video because of what the End Singer said during that fight. And of course, she brings up the use of dynamis during the Limit Break. And I thought to myself, oh no. If I release that lore video, everyone is going to jump down my throat. Everyone is going to say, you're wrong, it's dynamis, even though there's been established lore on the Limit Breaks for years, long before Endwalker even came out. Who would have known a celestial zit would have gotten in the way of me posting a lore video for you all? But there it is. Now, there's a lot of people that want to say, like, I wonder how we may use dynamis in the future. And of course, that's a fair question. Dynamis was suddenly introduced, and I think it could be a crazy addition. But we also have to remember, the only person we ever see use dynamis was Medion. And Medion was designed to use dynamis, to take advantage of it. And it wasn't just one person, it was a lot of them. Dozens of dynamis created dynamis directed entities all working together as one unit to conjure all of that power, all of that energy in one place. Dozens of them. So the idea that one person would have enough influence over dynamis to make a noticeable school of magic or power or spell is very hard to imagine. But that does not mean that dynamis can't work for us. What we should imagine is how dynamis's inclusion may change or alter the abilities or practices of certain spells and jobs as they're used in the story or the game. Because dynamis, while not able to be grabbed and manipulated like Aether, might be able to change Aether's flow, augment spells and abilities, and do interesting things. For instance, the Dancer quest chain is all about making use of the emotional spectrum, making people go from a depressed, sad, and lonely state of mind to that of energetic, happy, and invigorated. That's what their dances are all about. So imagine how much more powerful a dancer could be if they willingly, or knowingly, in this case, interacted with a force like dynamis at the same time. Of course, you could apply this to other jobs like warrior with their rage, dark knight with their sense of justice, and so on and so forth. But that's food for thought, isn't it? Now, it might seem that during certain parts of this lesson that I've been giving the developers a hard time. And in a bit of a way, I am. No one's perfect, but I wouldn't have made more than 100 lore videos if I did not absolutely adore Final Fantasy XIV. And I give some aspects of the story a hard time simply because I know they could have been fleshed out a little bit better, a little bit more interest, or it could have been given to certain things. And if you think I'm giving Final Fantasy XIV a hard time at any point, I want to encourage you to look at how some of the WoW lore tubers have treated Blizzard lately. Like, my goodness. They are absolutely ruthless over there, and with a good reason, too. Oh, man. I want to feel bad for them, but it's hard to. Blizzard has been having a time of it lately, haven't they? But all that being said, I only have so much time left. So I would like us to all think about what I've said today so far. How not everything is going to be one-to-one or consistent, and that's okay. How certain scenes aren't meant to be interpreted one specific way. Sometimes there's a meaning that's hidden deep between all the different translations. So, with all that being said, members of the staff related to Square Enix have even stated that storytelling and lore aren't at the forefront of what is, or rather, not at the forefront of Final Fantasy XIV's development, right? And that's okay, because they're more interested in gameplay, getting people into the nitty-gritty, getting them into the fun, which is awesome. However, if you are a lore lover like me, and want to see more lore content or more focused content in the future, I want you to imagine they can't hear you right now, can they? They're more interested in pushing a certain direction with the changes to the jobs, the changes to certain locations, and yada yada, than lore-driven content. However, as an audience, if you want to see more lore, story, world building woven in to what is being displayed in game, out of game, or whatever, you speak up, like I do sometimes. With Ilsa, especially, never forget, uncloud Ilsa, uncloud Ilsa. So, if you want more lore, if you want to see the world of Final Fantasy XIV try to tap into its true potential, you need to make it clear, as a consumer, that that's what you want. Without any clear evidence that people care about these things, the Final Fantasy XIV dev staff and Square Enix as a whole won't care either. They're going to go where they know people are going to be interested in certain things. So, if you're a lore fan, if you love lore, rise up, speak up, don't be afraid to admit how much you love this world and how much more of it you want to see, how many more other things you want revealed in the future. Because I know I do. I would love to be able to make a video on the Viera, Hrothgar, Gunbreaker, Dancer, Reaper, Sage, but it's hard, and I can't at the moment because they haven't released anything yet. They haven't released enough for me to dedicate an entire deep dive to. But if there's no proof that we want to see this, we may never will. So, if you want lore, you've got to ask for it. Talk to your favorite lore tubers. Talk to your FCs, your friends. Get people excited. Think like, wouldn't it be cool if we knew more about like the Viera? Wouldn't it be cool if we know what the Hrothgar were like before the creation of Bozia? And the other jobs, and so on and so forth. You gotta ask for it. You gotta let them know. As for me, I would simply be content with unclouding Ilsa at the moment. But as you know, that's just me. So, I hope you all have enjoyed what was almost an hour-long rant from me about certain things. And the fact that all of you have been able to show up is absolutely phenomenal. So I would like all of you to know that I am so grateful to all of your support, all of your combined interest in Final Fantasy XIV, in me, in the projects that myself and other lore content creators are making for you. I have had an absolutely amazing time making all these videos for you, and this, I feel, has been a phenomenal first live stream ever for myself. 'Cause, man, what a time. What a time indeed. So, to any of you interested in doing a bit of a Q&A still, there are multiple ways we can do this. We could, basically, if you are very interested, I'd be happy to stream for you either on my own personal Twitch or my own personal YouTube as we move on to, as we allow the lovely Lunarcon individuals to move on to other bigger and better things. So if you are interested in a Q&A, I will have links available to certain things on my Discord, on my Twitter. Actually, my Twitter is probably the best and most likely area that you'll be able to get links to that stuff. You can find me on Synodic Scribe on Twitter, of course, and I hope to see you there. Thank you all so much for having me. This has been amazing, and I look forward to seeing what else we might be able to uncover together in the future, because I'm having the time of my life, and I hope that you all are too. As a YouTube channel that's almost broken 20,000 subscribers, in 1 year, which is phenomenal, I can't wait to see what else I can do with 1 more year. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank the Lunarcon staff and everyone present for putting this together. I hope you all have an amazing day. And as always, stay safe, my friends.